Hey, everybody. Dan Turbyville, and this is Powerhouse Fence Show. Sorry I'm late. We we got wrapped up in a meeting prepping for Fence Tech, which is only, 10 days away or something? It's crazy, man. It's crazy how quick it gets here. It's like one day you're picking your booth in, the spring. And then the next day you're like, oh, crap, we have to be there in a few days. So that was the mode we were in earlier today. But anyhow, today's episode is called Why Commercial Fence. So this goes along with the theme of being careful what you consume. And so one of the things I always like to ask people when they say, oh man, we're going to get into commercial fence, what can we do, is why. So we'll get into that. And, I think we consume things that influence us, right? And so a lot of people consume something and only get one little piece of the picture, and then they just run with that little tiny piece. It's not getting into this commercial fence world, which is a really big term, and I think it's not clearly defined, but getting into that, it's not always the right move for everybody. There's some people that should, some people that shouldn't, some people that could, some people that can't, right? And so it's not always the right move. And we plan to kind of dive into that and touch a little bit on the whole be careful what you consume theory. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate everybody that listens to this show. It's really wild to look at on the podcast downloads, so the audio only downloads, which this show is on all the major podcast platforms, if you don't know. But if you look at that, it shows me a map of the world, and it has a little dot for every person that downloads the show, and it's all over the world, and that's really wild to me. So our show is presented by Memphis Fence Company, Simpalo, and Valgard Strategies Groups. And we have some partners, and we did a disservice because of our cramming to get ready for Fence Tech. We have the new border that goes around the show, I guess this way. And it's in the wrong format, so I couldn't put it on here. So sorry. But anyway, our partners, Thornton Fence Consulting Group. So they do fence consulting, right? Tony Thornton's been in the fence industry forever and knows everyone and has seen it all. Fence News, great fence industry publication. They print it, right? And they send it to you, and it's a piece of paper. And EZG Manufacturing, they make the big orange equipment that you see at trade shows, and we see people have attached to their equipment. All of these things we know, we use, and we support. And the new one that we should have on the screen, but we don't, is My Salesman. And I do sincerely apologize to everyone for not having that on there. But so we have their software. We use it occasionally now, not as much as we did when we ran residential. It was a mandatory part of our process. Every person that called, they were ran through My Salesman, or we charged them to come to their house. And we didn't try to sell jobs on the front end, but we wanted them to have an idea of how much it was going to cost before we went out there. And we were able to drastically reduce the number of leads that we were running and increase the quality of the ones that we were actually still going out to visit. So definitely something worth checking out. If you're going to be at Fence Tech, we'll be there. All of these other people that I've mentioned will be there as well. They're good folks. Stop by and say hello. Feel free to stop by our booth and say hello. We'll be giving away some swag, and try to just be a cool place to hang out. There's going to be a few of us there. We'll be running around doing stuff, so make sure you stop by and say hello. The things that we are listening to right now, well, the things we are reading, I am listening to. So we have a book club at work, and we've been going through From Drift to Drive by Chris Robinson, and we've really enjoyed that. It's a lot about complacency and how it's sneaky and hidden and how to identify complacency. And we haven't made it to the point of, combating complacency necessarily in the book, but I assume that will be the next thing to come. So y'all know I listen to Founders Podcast. He also has another one, David Senra, that's newer, that I've been listening to. This week, I listened to an episode of The Knowledge Project that was about Fred Smith. Fred Smith, if you don't know, the founder of FedEx. FedEx's headquarters is in Memphis. So there's a tiny bit of a connection there. And it's a really cool story. And then I listened to another podcast called My First Million. I listen to that every now and then. So there's some stuff for you to check out. And with that, I think I'm ready to go. Oh, I will say, make sure you follow or go, maybe not follow, go look at Memphis Fence and some Paulo and Powerhouse on social media. Our guy's been putting out some cool stuff. So shout out to Jamie for putting out that awesome content. And with that, we're ready to get to business here. All right. So let me say this again before I get into this. As I talk about be careful what you consume, I do not have a person in mind that I'm like, don't listen to this person. There's not anything like that. So I'm a huge supporter of events and listening to speakers and coaches and consultants and, everything like that. And 100% people should engage in those things. Events, huge thing, right? Mentioned Fence Tech is coming up. There's a lot of events that happen throughout the year in the fence industry, and they are phenomenal ways to go network with people and build relationships. You can listen to some of the heavy hitters stand in front of a room and talk, and you can hear them share their experience. I heard a quote the other day that, if you don't know, I've always heard a lot of people that run big successful businesses, they read a lot. I don't remember if it was Fred Smith or if it was someone else, but what I heard about him was they dedicated 4 hours a day to reading. Every single day they read for 4 hours. And during that same conversation, whoever I was listening to and whoever it was about, because I remember neither, they said that you read books because you get the insight, a lifetime of experience and knowledge from the person that wrote the book, and you get it in a few hours, right? So if you want to, they had some quote that was something like, if you want to live one life, don't read a book. If you want to live 1,000 lives, read books. So that's crazy. I think the same thing applies whenever you go to an event and you listen to somebody in the front of the room that's got 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years experience more than you have, then you get their years of experience that they share with you. And that's pretty cool. But at the events, like I said, the networking and relationships and stuff like that is really a big deal. And you definitely should check those out. And I have one more disclaimer that I'll throw out is I like the saying, nothing is always. Okay. There's a lot of people talk about a bell curve, right? There's edge cases, there's things that are always outliers. But what I do with you every single week is I share my experience. Okay. So this is the facts as I know them, or these are my opinions as I believe them. So last week, the episode was called Be Careful What You Consume. And I kind of covered some basics of that and got into it a little bit. And I plan to go a little bit deeper into some specific topics that are related to that. So now we're going to go a little deeper into a topic that we all hear about, right? I see the questions. People ask me the questions. Like it's out there. So I might get a phone call or an email or see on some Facebook groups or other social media or something like that. People, I want to get into commercial fence. Where do I start? Well, so there's this Chris Robinson. Whenever I saw him speak, and he did this thing where he's like, learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little. That's great. I think this may be an exception to where learn a lot before you do a little, right? So understand what you're getting into. If you want to go down some avenue of commercial work, you need to understand what you're doing. Generally, I'm an advocate for the whole learn a little, do a little principle, but I think this one, you got to learn a pretty good bit before you do. So whenever, let's say you call me, okay, and you say, man, I want to do commercial fence. Where do I need to start? Well, I'm going to ask you a few questions. And first thing that I'm going to ask you is, what's your overhead percentage? I'm going to ask you if you have a lot of credit. I'm going to ask you, why do you want to do commercial work? Like there's going to be some other questions, but number one, what's your overhead? I think people hear other people talk about commercial work, and they think it's just all sunshine and rainbows and makes all their problems go away and it's everything wonderful. Well, it's still work, right? And it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And what's the motivation? Maybe sometimes people just want to make money. Maybe they think, I'll go sell some commercial jobs and I'll make a bunch of money and I'll be rich. Well, the money is a tool. Okay. Money's not the goal. And if the goal is just money, then I'd probably say just take a look at what you're doing and just think about it and decide if you're doing something that you love or something that you're passionate about, and just take a moment to reflect on that. If money is all you care about, hey, I don't know, maybe the fence world is the best place you could find to make money, but if you don't really love what you're doing and you're not passionate about it, you might want to think about that. So, overhead, okay? Told you that was the first thing I asked people. This episode's not going to be about overhead, I promise you, but it's very important. This is probably one of the maybe top 3 most important things for me is that people understand overhead and what it is, what their overhead is, how they need to bid jobs, what their margins need to be to survive. All of these things all revolve around knowing your overhead. So it should be something very important. It's not that hard to do. Go do it. So I'm going to bring you an urgent message from the Powerhouse Studios. And I wish that I had that little sound, but I don't. If you don't know your overhead, go do it. I already said it, but there it is. So I would stop trying to grow, stop trying to do new things, stop trying to expand here, expand there, bring on new business, all of this stuff. Like slow down for a second, get your stuff in order, and then go. All right. So when I ask people that question, I'm trying to feel them out, right? And I'm going to learn a few things. I'm going to learn if they know their business and if they know what their margin needs to be and if they know how to bid jobs. Right. And I'm going to understand, do they need to keep growing and keep seeking new revenue streams and keep trying to go further and further and further down that path? Or do they need to slow down a minute and get their stuff in order? So, really great way for me to feel them out, where they are, what they got going on, stuff like that. Next thing that I'm going to touch on here, I told you I had a few questions, right? Do you have a line of credit? Well, you should have a line of credit, especially if you're going to go down some path of doing commercial work, because you will burn through cash quickly, right? The payment process is not the same. The cash flow is not the same. None of those things are the same, and you're going to burn through cash. So have a line of credit, have a banker that you can call, right? And they know who you are, or that you can go have lunch with, or something like that. Have some sort of connection with a banker instead of just some website that you log into and you see how much money's in your account and that's it, right? I do not want to call a 800 number and have to give them my account number to get in touch with a person at the bank. I want a banker. You got to have those connections. You got to have that relationship, because honestly, this thing's hard enough, right? And we need to put everybody we can in our corner to help us along the way. And they're a big one. You want to be able to have that relationship. You want to be able to have the line of credit. And a line of credit's not a long-term loan. Okay. It doesn't mean if you get a 50 or 100 or 500 or $10 million line of credit that you just go buy some junk and let it sit there and pay a little bit here and there. Like, don't use it like it's a long-term loan, because that will deteriorate your relationship with the bank. Use the line of credit as it's supposed to be used. Same thing with a credit card, right? Like, what is the rule? If you go over a third of the balance of the credit card, it makes your credit score go down or something like that. I mean, you don't want to have a bunch of money sitting on a line of credit indefinitely. If you do, roll it over to a loan. Figure out some kind of way, because you have a relationship with your banker. Talk to them. Say, hey, I've got this money sitting on this line of credit. I want to roll it over into an actual loan, free up my line of credit, and make recurring monthly payments to get this loan taken care of. Have the conversation. But you need the line of credit because, I mean, I don't want to say there are not people who have cash flow problems from time to time. Like, I don't know that, maybe there's some people that don't, but for the most part, you're going to talk to people. And as long as they're being honest with you, they're going to admit that cash gets tight sometimes. I mean, you get out on several big projects and something goes wrong on one, you miss a billing cycle, you do something, you get retainage held up on a few jobs. Like it just happens and you burn through money pretty quick. Okay. So let's talk about the actual consumption part. But first, I'm going to consume some tea. So, somewhere along the way, people consumed something that made them think they want to do some commercial work. Again, that word, it's a really big term, okay? Because there's a lot of paths you can go down. And somebody, you consume something and it made you think, man, I want to go do some commercial work. Maybe you listen to a podcast. Maybe you talked to somebody in the fence world. Maybe you watched a little short video on some social media thing, like whatever it was, you consumed something somewhere that made you think you wanted to do that. Maybe you heard about somebody doing $1 million job or a 5 million or a 10 million or whatever that was, right? Maybe it was $100,000 job and you're like, man, if I could do $100,000 job, that would just be insane. Well, it's insane. Something was consumed somewhere and led to this desire. So I'm just going to throw out a few things here. If you watch these little short videos or videos on the internet or whatever, how many of those videos are people just airing their wins? Right? Do many people air their losses? Some do, but if you see somebody that made a video and they're like, "Oh, look how great this was. It was fantastic." Like, you might not see the 500 other things that sucked to get to that one moment. Okay? There's not I don't think there's really such a thing as an overnight success because we see like businesses start or people go down some path or whatever that is. And I mean, and it's like everything's just clicking, right? It's all going right into place. But what you don't see is the years of their life that led to that moment. You don't see what they did to get there. You don't see the relationships that they made because they were in the right room and they shook the right hands and the connections and the people they have in their corner that make it all possible. That's what you don't see. All you see is the win. Right. And yeah, maybe there's some crazy scenario where, there was some lottery moment where like the planets aligned and something just happened and went super perfect for somebody. That those kind of things happen. Right. But people win the lottery too. So if you want to see the whole picture, you have to see the whole picture. It's a pretty good quote. I think I might put that in a book or something one day. So when people are doing these $1 million jobs, what do they have that allows them to do that? Right? I mean, they didn't just wake up one day and decide to go do it, right? They have knowledge. Okay. They have obviously fence knowledge, but they have business knowledge. And you're going to have some business knowledge. You're going to be able to run a company and you got to get that overhead piece of it, right? Because when you bid a job, you better be right when you bid these big jobs. Well, actually, you better be right when you win the big jobs. And you got some construction knowledge that goes in there. So you got to understand the overall process, not just that we're going to go install some fence. Like you got to understand all the things that lead up to you installing fence and how you have to perform, how they expect you to perform, what they want you to do. Right. And that's why I tell people, if you're going to go down this path, start with something small. All right, because it's going to give you a place to get your feet wet, kind of get an understanding of what's going on and sort all that out before you just go dive headfirst into the deep end. Right? Put some floaties on. It's okay. right? It's like whenever you start riding a bike, you put some training wheels on, put your training wheels on. So these people have a lot of experience, obviously, right? And they also have cash, or they have access to cash, or they have some creativity and they figure out how to get it done creatively. It's got to be one of those things because you got to finance the job. So I mean, if your net profit, net income off of $1 million job, let's say it's 10%. All right. So you pocket $100,000 off of that thing after your overhead, after everything else. So that means you spent $900,000 doing the job. And then that 10%, if that's what you made on the job, like, and that's your retainage, you got to wait a while before you ever make any money actually, right? Like cash. So you got to have cash, you got to have access to it, or you got to be really creative. And having a relationship with a banker is going to help you a lot. Sorry. So again, I would just start with a small job, right? Don't start with something crazy. I mean, yeah, it's exciting. It looks super cool. It would be so much fun to tell your friends about all of that. But you know what really sucked to tell your friends is that you sold $1 million job and that you tried to do it and you went broke trying. And then you got sued because you didn't do the job and they had to go hire someone else to finish and you didn't charge enough. So they had to pay more. Like, that's not a fun story you want to tell anybody. So let's just not start there. Okay. All right. So, man, that's some heavy stuff, right? So maybe sometimes people think they're going to jump into commercial work and their margins are going to skyrocket and they're going to make all this money. And, I suppose that could happen. But I hope that in the residential space, assuming that people are transitioning from residential to some path in the commercial world, hopefully in the residential space, you're able to sell your product on value and not just selling the cheapest thing that you can do. Right. Because if you're selling your product on value, you should be able to make decent margins. I mean, people throw around 40% as like a fence industry standard. Who knows? I don't have access to other people's margins, so I can't confirm or deny that, but that's kind of what people use as the industry standard. And you might be able to get 40% on some kind of commercial work in some areas. And there are stories that float around of people selling these jobs and, making big margins and stuff like that on them. And that's good. That's great. I'm super happy for them. But it's not like that all the time. So I've mentioned this a few terms, but, commercial is a pretty broad term, right? And so you can do public, private, you can work for general contractors, do federal work, do state work, like whatever it is. You can do business to business commercial stuff. Like, I would say if you're going to do it, pick one of those and pursue that path. Right? Don't try to do it all. Trying to do it all, I don't know that that's ever the right path, right? Focus on one thing, get get headed in that direction, get your feet under you on that one thing before you try to venture out and do some more. So, I think doing commercial fence and operating in this world, it's a volume game. It takes a lot of volume. It takes a team of people to be able to handle this stuff if you're going to do it to scale. And I mean, you have to have estimators, project manager, administrative people. You got to have accounting folks. You got to have now. You got to go get some CPAs involved, which also you should have a relationship with, and your banker, right? But I mean, you got to have a lot of people involved. And I'll tell you that we bid a lot of jobs in the commercial space, and I will also tell you that our closing rate is way lower than it was in residential because we could sell the value of residential a little bit easier than we can when you go bid public work to general contractors. It just is a different game and it's a little bit harder to sell that value. Relationships help, trust helps, right? But trying to get your foot in the door, you don't have trust really. Like, yeah, you can go to events, you can meet people, you can network, you can do all those things, but when it comes down to hiring you to do a job, that they've never used you before, right? So you don't have that, like, oh man, we've done 27 jobs for them and they know we're going to take care of them kind of. You don't have that thing yet. You can get there, but You don't start with it. So our margins in most commercial work, not all, are lower than what we did in residential. And we have to constantly feed the monster. Okay, so we have to be able to outrun the overhead. And I've looked at some jobs before because sometimes you can get like you bid jobs and it's public, right? Everybody's price is posted. You get to see who bid it, how much they bid, all of that. And then sometimes you get feedback from general contractors when you say, "Hey, what happened on this job? How did things shake out?" Like you do that follow up that I don't like calling a follow up. But when you go back to them and you check in and you see how things are, sometimes they send you prices back from other people and they let you know exactly how everyone's bid was. And I promise you, I've seen jobs, I've gone back and I've looked at the numbers and I would have had to been somewhere in like this 12 to 15% margin to win the job. Okay. I'm not going to tell you what margin we use, but I told you industry standard 40%. I've gone back, done the math, reverse engineered projects to figure out what margin we would have to be. And I've seen jobs in those 12 to 15% ranges. Now, there's a whole nother piece of that. Well, actually, there's a couple other pieces. What do you have? You have material and you have labor. Material, I mean, yeah, people pay more and less for material. Okay. And then labor, like people pay their installers more and less. But I think efficiency is a big part of that. And if you can do a job faster than the next person and your material costs the same and your labor rates are the same, well, then you're going to win the job. So efficiency is a big deal. And that takes equipment and it takes the right tools and it takes the right skills and the right training and the right knowledge to be able to successfully go out and do it faster while you're still being safe. Don't forget that. Uh, I watched this guy and he was talking about this phrase safety first. And this guy said, if safety actually was first, we would never do anything. We wouldn't even get out of bed, right? Because there's some very slim chance that when you go to get out of bed, you're going to fall over and hit your head on something. So if safety actually was the first thing we were concerned about, we wouldn't get out of bed. I'm not saying that disregard safety. Don't take it that way. I just thought it was an interesting thing and decided to share. So again, industry standard 40. I've seen jobs 12 to 15% is where we'd have to be. And maybe, maybe they have cheaper material. Maybe their installers make less money. Maybe their installers are faster. Like those are all possibilities in there that would fluctuate what that margin number would have been. But based on my material and my labor, that's where I would have had to be. So uh, let's run through this scenario real quick. Because I said we have to feed the monster, right? And we have to outrun the overhead. We got to stay ahead of it. So let's run through that. We bid a job. Okay. Now, you know what happens after we bid a job is we wait. And we wait to find out what happened because we're bidding a job to a general contractor. So they get 200 proposals that they have to sort through. They have to make selections. Then they have to turn in their bid to an owner. Now the owner has to sort through maybe multiple bids and then they have to make a choice. They have to make sure that everything is in order, everybody's on board with it, and then they can decide to hire a general contractor. Okay. So that process takes time. So then the general contractor is awarded a job. Well, normally they don't send contracts out that day. Okay. And unless we're doing temporary fence that has to be done at the very beginning of the project, we normally go at the end of their procurement process, which I mean that might take 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks for them from the time they're awarded a job until they award us the job. Sometimes it's much longer. I'll be honest, we're doing a job right now that I think the general contractor drug their feet for a long time to hire a fence company. And I know we've worked with bidding the job and stuff like that probably since I don't maybe June, May, something like that. And like now we're down to the wire almost. And I mean, we don't even have material. because they waited so long to award the fence. And so we're negotiating the contract right now. We're waiting on a response from them. We went out there and looked at the site already, and like, I mean, there's a decent bit of the stuff that they have is ready for us, and they're waiting on us. And it just it gets messy like that sometimes, right? I like to say this phrase that nobody cares about the fence until everybody cares about the fence. And sometimes it feels, oh, a lot of times it feels that way. So, anyway, back to this thing procurement, right? So, if they're on top of it, they get their procurement process done in 6 or 8 weeks. So now we're 2 or 3 months after bid date. Okay. And we have to go through, we got to negotiate the contract because, like, don't be afraid to mark up a contract. If you get one and you disagree with some things that are in there, you can go back to them and you can try to negotiate on those. Now, whether it works or not is a different story. Sometimes they're like, okay, yeah, we'll wiggle a little bit here and there, but don't get crazy and think that they're just going to negotiate with you on everything and just give you all that you want, right? Because there's some stuff on there that's just going to be a hard pass. So navigate your way through that however you see fit and however works for you, but you can redline contracts. Okay. So again, that process might take a couple weeks. Submittals takes a couple weeks, right? We got to prepare them, we got to send them in, we got to wait for them. They'll come back and say, okay, revise this. And then we have to look at it, make a decision. Then we revise it, send it back, da 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 da. Well, then we order material. I mean, that might take a couple weeks. It might take a few months. It just depends on what it is. And then typically we wait until it's time to install. Sometimes they're already ready for us to install before we even get a contract. Then we go out, we install the job, we submit a bill, we get paid, 45, 60 days later. So you think about all that. All right, let me run back through that real quick. The general contractor submitted a bid, went through their negotiation process with the owner, right? Let's say that's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. And then they start procurement and it takes them 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks to award a job to us. And then we have a couple weeks of negotiating contracts, submittals, all that, order material, a couple weeks, and then we can go install. All right. So that there's a lot of time that's passed from the time we bid the job until it's actually time to install it. And that's if it goes pretty quick. Sometimes we install fence that we bid 3, 4 years ago. It's just a part of it, right? If you're going to play the game, that's just how you have to do it sometimes. And so if you only did work for general contractors and you ran out of work, then what do you do? Right? It's not like you can't sell a job to a general contractor and go do it tomorrow. Again, nothing is always. So there are definitely situations where stuff like that happens, but it's not like in the residential world or in the business to business commercial world or any of that where you can get on a job quickly. You got to stay out ahead of it and you got to fight. You got to fight to stay ahead. You got to be on top of that stuff every single day. And if you're going to do it at scale, it takes an army of people to get that done. And it takes good people. So maybe people want to go into the commercial space because you think, oh man, less customers, it's going to be less stress, less people to deal with, less of all these things, right? Well, now you're dealing with different people. Okay. Not to say that, like, I don't mean anything bad about people that are homeowners, right? But it's just a different world. And so you're dealing with people that are construction professionals and you're dealing with people who can be highly demanding. I know residential customers can be, and it's different, right? But you're still dealing with people who can be highly demanding. And like the scenario I just talked about, a lot of times you're dealing with people that kind of just have a general disregard for what you're doing, right? If a homeowner hires a fence company, well, they care about that fence. So they're not really going to have that disregard most of the time. But if you're on a project and say it's a $30 million project and you're doing a $50,000 piece of that installing fence, that's not much of that pie, right? And they've got a lot of stuff going on that they're focused on. So dealing with people who are construction professionals, people who are demanding, and you're dealing with people a lot of times who are no stranger to passing out a good old butt chewing on somebody. And man, one of my favorite stories, I don't even know when it was. I was young. I bet how old was I? Maybe 18, 20 years old, something like that. And I remember I got a phone call from a superintendent, and this guy was just, man, he was ballistic. I mean, ranting and raving and cussing and yelling and everything else. And I didn't even know what to do. I couldn't even respond. Like it completely paralyzed all of me. And it just so happened that there was someone standing beside me, and I took my phone off of my ear and I just handed it to them. And, like, I imagine I had some crazy look of terror in my eyes because I had no idea what to do. It was the first time I'd ever been in that situation. And obviously the guy was unhappy because we weren't doing something that he thought we should have been doing or we were supposed to be doing. But man, he went to town on me and I didn't even know what to do. I freaked out and I just handed the phone to this other guy. Didn't say a word. He had no idea what the call was about. And I was like, "No, I'm done. I'm out." And I couldn't handle it. Now it's time for tea. So, again, sometimes you're dealing with folks that are not bashful about cussing you out, chewing you out, all of that stuff. And that's a thing that you just got to learn, right? I mean, people get mad in the residential world, so maybe that translates, but I don't know. For me, it just felt different. I've been on the phone with I don't want to say a lot, like we suck, right? But I've been on the phone with some residential folks that were unhappy. And I feel like I can navigate that world a little bit better than a project manager or a superintendent or something like that who is just super mad. And so in this world, right? Back to talking about, oh, less customers, less stress, it's easier, all of that stuff. Well, you're up against hard deadlines too, right? I mean, yeah, let's say you're doing a fence at someone's house and they're having a party. My party's next Saturday. I need the fence done before that. Like, you get that pressure there, right? But it's not always like that. There's a lot of jobs where, like, people just want it done. And you get into working with general contractors and things like that, and now you have real problems. You have liquidated damages. And on top of liquidated damages, the general contractor is going to charge you whatever it costs for them to stay on that site because you're not done. So, liquidated damages plus GC cost of being there longer than they should have. And, you have facilities that are opening. I mean, imagine if you're working on a giant sorting facility and you're the holdup, right? Something that earns, I don't know, $2 million dollars a day in revenue, whatever it is, 10 million a day in revenue, and you're the holdup. Huh. You want to talk about being under stress. That's crazy. Uh, we once had to go out, and me and two other people from the office went out and we removed, I don't know, 1,000 feet of a fence one day. And we had to go do it because there was like 10 or 12 people from Washington, D.C., politicians that were coming here for a grand opening of this facility. And I mean, there were news cameras there, there was all kinds of stuff, and that fence had to be removed. And so we went out there on Good Friday. We didn't work on Thanksgiving. We went the day after and we had to remove it in the rain, in the cold, and all of that. But we got it done, right? And that's just what you wind up in those scenarios sometimes. So you have facilities that are trying to open. You have other trades that have to get work done. And a lot of times the fence has to be in before somebody else can do it. And man, you just you get under a lot of pressure, right? And it's maybe a different kind of stress. I don't know, but it's still stress, I promise. And there's plenty times that I've been sick to my stomach whenever I realize the situation that we're in. And it's not fun. Okay. So just because just remember, we're talking about be careful what you consume, right? So be careful what you consume when you hear somebody talking about it and they're like, man, this is the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. It's so great. There's no problems. Everything's wonderful. Eh, maybe, right? Maybe they're just like the best in the world and it is like that. but a lot of times you still have difficulties, okay? All right, so let's wrap this up. So think about this. Who were you listening to that convinced you that you wanted to do some sort of commercial work? All right, that's a question. If in case you didn't know, that is a question. Oh no, my computer is doing some crazy stuff. Man, I've been having all kinds of issues today. Why do you want to do commercial work at all? Right? There has to be a reason. Why do you want to do it? If you want more revenue and you're already like you're killing it in the residential space, just go do more of that. Right? Add some other offerings instead of just fence. Incorporate some other things that happen in the yard or whatever, right? And you can increase revenue other ways. But the why is important. So you were remember, you were listening to somebody. Did they know what they were talking about? Right? Or were they just telling some random story and they were full of crap? And maybe those people have incredible systems in place, but you know what's behind those systems is maybe decades of building those systems. They didn't just start and have that stuff all figured out on day one. Maybe they have an amazing team behind them that has 100 years of experience in that specific world. So do you have those systems? Do you have that experience? Are you ready? Are you setting yourself up for success or are you setting yourself up for failure? So go build the systems, make sure you learn before you go take the leap, and be careful what you consume. Be careful who you listen to. And I'll see you next time.